what's taking place on the inner is expressing itself on the outer, and that's the way it works. Inner cohesion translates to outer cohesion. Inner fragmentation is going to show up as outer fragmentation. You all know that this by now, right? This teaching, this truth. How many people here know that for themselves, to whatever degree are you learning? Good. Okay. It's empowering. It's not meant to make one feel scared. It's meant to be empowering. That's the whole purpose of being inwardly drawn and working on the inside, is that we're creating inner equilibrium. And I'm not saying that all of life is going to show up in a perfect way, but we're going to have a much better chance of being able to be in balance to meet it. And this period of time in the world right now, more than ever, we need to have as much inner equilibrium as possible. Would you agree? That this is like, the need for this has been amped up. And so if we're lagging behind, we need to go back and catch up as best we can. Be on a fast course, a crash course of learning how to meet ourselves and be with ourselves. So we can be more transparent with what's taking place on the outside and not be thrown off and triggered. Can you see how important that is, that inner work? It's always been important, but it's an especially important time now because the collective is so noisy. We really want to have that inner capacity to be grounded within, so we can know the difference of what is ours and what is the collective pain. What is ours and what is someone in our own household's pain. So boundaries, these boundaries are really important. I mean, one wouldn't think that, with deepening into spirituality and as you grow in your ability to feel love for others and compassion, that takes place, doesn't it? I hope it is taking place for you, that you feel more understanding because you know that really so much of what's happening with somebody is not personal. It's not personal against you. It's an arising within them. So the best way to meet that is to be in understanding and to be centered here within yourself, so that whatever's arising, we don't get sucked in and make it about ourselves, because that's the self center that makes it about ourselves. Right? We make it personal instead of seeing it for what it is that they have their own challenges. So that's with an individual, but then as a collective, it has its own challenge. And we really need to not make it personal. Know where we are linked and hooked in with the collective. Know where we are linked and hooked with another person. I went through a real passageway with the unity phase, and some of you are touching in on unity or live there, or unity can come and go. Unity is just when you feel love with no agenda. Love is here, and you love for no reason other than the beauty of that person without an agenda. Right? All of you have felt that, right? Love with no agenda. That's touching in on unity. That's unconditional love that you're touching in on. But there's a wisdom aspect that needs to be brought in, where while we may be feeling this unconditional love, which can really, make boundaries transparent, the wisdom comes in and says, and yet there's the human component where we need to be boundaried and know the difference between ourselves and that person to really be effective in the world. So while love has no agenda, we certainly still need to navigate and know when to do what, know when to have a no, when to have a yes, when to say enough, right? And so when I was in the unity phase, which was a long period, I had to learn that, because I think that the self got so wiped out that I would leave myself out of the equation without meaning to, because love felt so real and so beautiful, and there was so much understanding that arose for where people were coming from, that I would become maybe a little bit too unboundaried about accepting maybe bad behavior or whatever. I don't know. It wasn't like terrible, but I in retrospect, I can see that maybe I put up with some things for a little too long, because I was in this kind of unbounded love space. So the Buddha actually said there's a wisdom component, that there's something called idiot compassion. I was kind of maybe touching on that a bit. Idiot compassion, because it can happen, and that's why they have a teaching around it in Buddhism. There's love and compassion, then there's the wisdom piece. They say two wings of a bird: love, compassion, and wisdom. And the wisdom piece is to not have idiot compassion. So it kind of keeps you kind of a little bit awake, like be awake within opening to the unbounded territory. It's not just with love, it's also with just the spacious awareness. Remain a bit vigilant is the point. Because others don't necessarily benefit from that kind of unboundedness. Anybody who has raised children or is raising children knows this. You can't just be unboundaried all across the board. But it's a fine distinction to not be using fear or personal agenda to create boundaries. So it's a wisdom. Like, where is it coming from? A wisdom. To remain in integrity, I guess. Remain in integrity to yourself. The part of you, the self of you that is growing in awareness that it's not identified. It's very tricky, can be a tricky period of time. Has anybody here experienced what I'm talking about? No hands? where you're opening up to unconditional love and unboundedness. And then you're like, well, how do I navigate these relationships? How do I make people accountable, or myself? How do I include myself in this mix? It's very yin, it's a very yin place to be unboundaried and to open to this transparency where the heart is just allowing. It's very feminine in nature, whether you're a man or woman, doesn't matter. It's very feminine, It's what we love about the Divine Mother, that we feel this unconditional love and acceptance and care, and we're welcome as we are. And it's a beautiful thing, and you wouldn't want it to go away. You want to open to that within yourself, towards yourself, and then to gift that to those around you. But you don't want things to go run amok. Well, and so this brings in this piece about your personal relationships, like whom you're bringing into your sphere, your personal environment, to have wisdom about what is a good match for you. I'm not saying perfect match, because we're all human, but where you're not compromising yourself to a degree where you make yourself sick, where you're slowing your personal growth, your evolution, and your soul's hurting because of a belief inside that we have to do this. We have to be giving in a certain way to this person or have them in our lives. It makes me a little uncomfortable to talk about this a bit, because I know that almost everybody has somebody or two or whatever, probably, maybe. If you don't, fine. Just because I don't want to make you wrong or that person wrong. That's why I feel a little uncomfortable. Or say, or I'm not pointing that you should in any way end anything. That's not my job, my role. Okay? I'm just bringing up a real spiritual truth, an aspect of truth, is that the more that we evolve and become in alignment with the integrity of truth, the more that truth is going to ask us to be in integrity to ourselves. It's really the way it works. Have you all noticed that? Has anybody here noticed that? Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah. It can be a little confusing, because of our ideas of what love looks like, supposed to look like. Love, it can be there, and one can still do what we need to do to take care of ourselves. And, from what I've learned is that when we take care of ourselves on that level, I'm not talking about the personal wounded self, okay? I'm talking about the part of you that is like coming into alignment so much that it knows when you feel out of alignment when you're with somebody ongoingly, not just once or twice or whatever. We're talking ongoingly, because we all have bad days or go through hard times, and maybe being with that friend or whomever, they're going through a hard time and it's hard to be around them. That happens. We're not meant to abandon people per se. But what I mean is, do you find yourself not being able to be yourself? Like all the time with them, or often. Do you know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that love goes away, because whatever is really love stays. Even when one walks away from, let's say, a relationship, if it's real love, that love does not go away. If it goes away, it's not real love, right? But love doesn't have an agenda. It means that you don't have to stay with somebody or stay in a job or stay in whatever in order to prove that love is there. In fact, it actually supports the truth of love, that it remains. And what I have discovered, which I was going to touch on a moment ago, is that it's good for all parties. It might not seem like it, but truth has to start with somebody, somewhere, and then it dominoes. And then truth is able to live here and live there. And then what might not have come forward comes forward because suddenly we're in alignment with the agendaless truth. The divine knows much better what we need than what we think we need.